chance to do an interview here. Feels good to sit down and relax a second. I still have deer out, but they're about 200 yards away, so I should be alright for now. It's exactly 1 week since I killed my muzzleloader buck, and the stand is back behind me there. Trevor and Heidi hunted it last night and this morning, and both nights they said a shooter came out pretty much exactly where my buck did. So I decided to try to get closer, and the thought was I could maybe do a hanging hunt in one of these trees like that I'm sitting by or behind me, because most of the deer don't come in range of that stand right now. At least I think in the rut it could be good, but not right now for bow. Some of them do, but not a lot of them. So I held the stand in, got in here clean, got to where I wanted to look for a tree to set up at, and first of all, none of the trees are ideal. I think I could get in one of them behind me, but there's so many leaves on it that I don't think you could even shoot, so it's definitely one that we'd have to trim, which wasn't an option today. So then I was hemming and hawing, and I decided to just set up on the ground, and I'm basically just set up in a clump of 3 trees. They're pretty large trees, and I'm just sitting behind them. I can shoot like right between them, but they're really close together, so they hide me pretty well. The only thing I don't like is I don't have a backdrop at all. So I just have to sit. If I sit still, they're not going to see me, and that's already proven to be the case. But like, I didn't even have a chance to do an interview. I just got my ghillie suit on and my extra clothes, and 3 does popped out, and right behind them, like a decent 3-year-old buck, and the does came to like 20 yards, of course. And I don't know if the wind swirled or if she just caught some movement, but one of them like just spooked really quickly, and she blew like once, and then they all kind of walked into the woods. So I don't think it blew the hunt. Obviously, I don't think it did, because like right as that was happening, that last buck came out, and he's like in the 140s. He's a really solid buck. Either a 3 or 4-year-old. We actually have trail camera pictures of him up in that corner over there. But he came out, and he actually came in range. I think he got to like 40, maybe a little under. I stopped ranging him when he got to like 50. But looked to pass on him. It just has so much season left and not ready to end it yet. I think he's a young deer, and I know there's a couple bigger ones around, or I could at least get on someone public. So a lot of season left. I knew I wasn't gonna shoot him, but that was really fun. But I'm glad to be able to stretch my legs a little bit. This is really intense today, because I don't have that much cover. I'm just sitting behind trees. So yet again, another bold strategy, Cotton.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
But when I was in here, the shooter 8-pointer came out, and I think came in range of here, so I think it should be a better place to be than the stand. It's just whether or not I'll be able to get away with it. So anyway, wish me luck. seems dark now, but it's still technically legal shooting light. I shot him probably almost 15 minutes ago already, but I've just been watching the spot where he stopped. He stopped about 75 yards away. I didn't hear anything after that, but the wind picked up, so he could have either walked up the hill or down the creek. I'm hoping he's laying over there. So I stopped filming. I was just gonna put the camera down because I didn't figure he was coming. And then he made a beeline to me. And I couldn't mess with the camera. I have limited amount of cover. I'm hunting on the ground as it is. So I crept around the tree to get to that side. And he started angling out down in the flat in between the stand and where I'm at. And I glassed and I could see some does. So I figured you should check those does. So I thought about hopping in the creek and going down to try to cut him off. It's shaking so bad. And I was so calm at the shot though. I've never been that calm in my life. I saw him down there, but then I lost track of him. And like less than a minute later, like 15 seconds, I don't know what the hell, he went that fast. I saw his rack coming from behind the tree, and he rounded the fence at about, there's just this fence separating the cattle pasture. He rounded it at like 35 yards, and before I knew it, he was at less than 20 yards. And I was sitting on the ground, just kneeling, and I got my bow up. He's just looking at me. He locked up on me. You could see my shape. He's like 20 yards away. I just stood still, and I had enough backdrop with these trees, but he just slowly, luckily, he was right under a tree to make a scrape, so I distracted him. I finished the draw, and right when I finished the draw, I started heading down the hill. And the only thing I'm worried about is I couldn't see my peep sight very well because it was dark. I could see my pins, I could see him, and he was so close. It was like, there was like 15 minutes left of legal shooting. I was like, it was just a little bit darker because it's cloudy. So I shot him, and it sounded good. He ran up the hill, kind of made a half circle, and then I think he stopped. I'm hoping he piled up. I thought it sounded good. So when it gets pitch dark, I'm gonna go check out my arrow, and hopefully it's got lung blood on it. So there's a lot of blood on the arrow. I'm not sure if I see any bubbles on it. So I don't know. I don't know if that could be a muzzle hit or not yet. I'm gonna let it get a little bit. It's light blood. It's a lot of blood. That's a lot of blood for a muzzle hit, so. Oh, look at that shot. The size of this thing. Oh my gosh. Perfect shot. Thank you, Lord. He died right where I last heard him.
Holy cow. Oh, he's got a cool crab claw. Do you see that?
Yeah.
He's nice. Nice black bub.
Thank you.
He's very similar to the one you shot on with your muzzleloader a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think
he's taller G2s. Oh, I didn't even see this.
Yeah, I didn't see that till I recovered him. Was it 11?
Yep.
That's the biggest deer I've ever shot. By he's big.
Big bodied sucker too. Congrats, man. That's
Thank
a nice
you.
buck.
Thank you. 25th, right?
25th. Boy, now you have nothing to hunt. You're done.
Yeah.
Guess does. I've never seen so much activity in October. It's heaven.
Huh?
Is this heaven?
I think so. I didn't.
That's where you're supposed to say no. It's Iowa.
No, it's Iowa. It's the land of the giants, is what it is. finally saw him. He stayed in the woods so long. I didn't think there's any way I was gonna shoot one.
Did you see the 8-point then?
Yeah.
Tail between his legs?
Yeah.
Did you text Trevor?
Yeah, I sent him a picture. I called him away. Here.
Oh, you did? What did he say?
He was like, why do you keep shooting deer when I'm not there? Got a messed up dew claw.
Ooh.
I wonder. I didn't notice him limping. Trevor said he didn't see him limping.
Look on him.
202.
She's a pig. How about that?
Well, it kind of beats my last one a little bit. Well, guys, I thought I'd go ahead and wrap up the video and give a little bit of a sneak peek for the next one. Our taxidermist should be pretty happy with us here when I take these deer in. Stay tuned for that one, but I never did wrap up this video. When we went and took pictures, I didn't do the typical sit behind the deer and talk about the hunt. My mom was pretty cold. She was helping me take pictures, and we were just in a little bit of a rush. I had school that day, so anyway, got him back out today, and I wanted to go back in there and take a little B-roll of kind of my ground setup and show you the path that the deer walked in on. I wasn't able to get the shot on film. Thinking back, it's definitely probably the craziest, most fun hunt I've ever experienced. This deer ended up fighting off that huge 8-pointer that I filmed in the video when I killed my muzzledeer buck a week before this one. They ended up getting in a monster knockdown drag out fight. The first round was up in the trees and I couldn't see most of it until they started running each other around, and it was probably a 5-minute fight at least. And then I actually was able to film them up in the woods. They were about 200 yards away, and they ended up literally going up to one another and staring each other down, and I could just see them turning their head really slow, and they were almost face to face. They must have been only this far apart, and it was 5 minutes. They just looked at each other, and finally they locked horns, and once they did, that second round was over before it even started. This buck locked horns with that 8-pointer and pushed him back so fast I couldn't even keep up with him, keep him in the frame with the camera. It was pretty insane and really intense. But after they got done fighting, this buck ran the 8-pointer further away from me along that tree line and stayed in the woods, and I actually saw him work even further into the trees, and I thought, well, what a great hunt, but I didn't think there was any way I was going to get a shot. I just figured he would stay in there until dark and then come out, but as luck would have it, I ended up seeing a bunch more deer. Ended up seeing that non-typical again, which I wouldn't have shot him, but he's a really sweet deer and he might be old, so we might be able to get back on him or see what he does. But I ended up having a doe come out, basically walk the same path as when I ended up shooting this deer, and I was watching her, and I think it was the doe I ended up lightly spooking earlier in the evening, and I got to give the thanks to God, because she was so spooked out. That's why I think it was the same doe. She was just sitting there looking around, never looked at me once. She couldn't see me, but she knew there was something up, and she was not downwind at that point, but she was heading downwind. I could feel the wind, and anyway, she must have looked around for 5 minutes and didn't move, and I just prayed to God that she wouldn't spook, because I knew if she did, pretty much, I mean, with that much time left in the hunt, I knew it was going to make these bucks stay in the woods and I was going to get a shot. So I just prayed to God, and man, right when I got done, I prayed really hard, and she calmed down, ended up walking right downwind to me. And this is at close range. I didn't film her, I didn't want to spook her. At close range, walked right downwind to me, and I guarantee you I smelled like a human, because I had been sweating my butt off on public land that morning and I hadn't showered. She didn't spook, so that was a gift from God above, and I got to point that out because I think it was crucial in getting this buck. And anyway, when I got done looking at her and realized she didn't spook, by the time I turned around, this buck had come out into the pasture, into the field. And he was only like 80 yards. I'm like, crap, that happened pretty quick. And at this point, I looked at the timestamp on the video. It was about 20 minutes before last light. Anyone who operates a camera knows that when you zoom in, it looks a lot darker. But the timestamp shows it was 20 minutes before end of legal light. And it was also a cloudy night, so that obviously makes it get darker a lot quicker as well. But he ended up working away from me a little bit when I initially saw him, up to the tree line again and started working scrapes. He actually walked right by a camera, which I wanted to go grab. And
ended up crossing the fence gap right there by that camera, worked another scrape, and at that point he turned and started facing me a little bit, kind of angled, and I knew at that point it could happen. I honestly wasn't too excited. I mean, I wasn't even shaking because I didn't think I was going to get shot, but at that point I went completely in a hunting mode. I put the camera by the tree just because self-filming on the ground is hard enough, even in thick brush, which I'm usually pretty comfortable self-filming on the ground in that scenario, but when I'm in the middle of a pasture and the only cover I have is the trees I'm sitting against, I just had to put that camera away. I was not going to risk losing an opportunity at this buck for running the camera, and it was going to be pretty dark footage anyhow. So I just set it down and I went into hunting mode, and there were some does that I noticed out in the flat down there, and they were probably 60 yards away, and I thought he'd go check those out. Well, sure enough he did, and as he was doing that, I rotated around the tree so I could be in front of it in case he came around, and I was actually thinking about hopping down in the creek and walking up it a little ways to try to get a shot. I thought that was going to be my only chance. So as I'm thinking about that, it must have been only a minute total from the time that I shut the camera off and set it down to when he was 20 yards away, because I thought he'd mess around with those does a little while and check them, but he ended up just skirting them. And by the time I get around the tree, I look up and I see the left side of his rack sticking out behind the trees that are in between us and coming right at me. And at that point I know he's like 40 yards. I don't really know why, but I decided to try to range stuff, and I couldn't really find anything. By the time I set down my rangefinder, he had come out from behind those same trees on the side that I could shoot on. And when he came out, he was less than 20 yards away, and instantly he just locked up on me. I mean, he saw a shape sitting next to a tree, but I had my ghillie suit on, and I knew if I just sat still, maybe it would work. I wasn't really thinking about it at the time. I really thought I was busted, but you know, I just stayed as still as I possibly could. I wasn't drawing yet because, like I said, I was trying to range, but I just had my bow up and tried to keep the broadhead from shaking. I was still pretty calm, but I was just trying to stay as still as possible. And as luck would have it, you know, another just freak coincidence, when he stopped and looked at me, he was standing in a scrape. And it distracted him just enough after about a minute and a half of staring me down. So I got the biggest buck of my life staring me down at 20 yards on the ground. I think I'm toast. He lifts his head up and starts working a scrape. I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to happen. So I draw my bow real slow as he's working that scrape, and by the time I got done drawing, he was done, and he started heading down the creek bank. Honestly, it looked like he was going to go and cruise for the night, just down that creek bank looking for just some does. But I ended up getting anchored. I took my time. Like I said, honestly, probably the calmest I've ever been at a shot, which is really weird because I thought that stare down would have made me shake pretty bad, but I think it was just the fact that I didn't think I was going to get a shot. I don't know, I was fairly calm until afterwards. And anyway, I took my time, found my pin, got anchored in, and ended up just following his front leg up with my pin. And turns out he's at 12 yards, so even I can't mess up that shot, and just absolutely smoked him. It was a high long shot, and he ended up just running up the other bank, doing like a half circle around. After looking at it in the daylight, he probably only went 50 yards. So it turned out great, and the only reason I couldn't see him run away is because he died before he got into an opening where I could see him. But I got really worried after the shot because honestly the arrow went through him so quickly that I thought maybe it was a bad sign. And once I found the arrow, it was nice. It looked like lung blood, but I couldn't really tell if there was any bubbles. It had gone through a lot of grass. There was a lot of blood on it, so I figured it wasn't a muscle hit. Well, then I went to the other side of the bank and I could not find any blood. And I looked and looked and looked, but he's not on a trail. He was out in the field, so there's no trail that I could walk. Because, you know, they don't start bleeding right away, especially with an arrow hit. And it was high lungs, so it would take a while for it to fill up and start coming out. I could not find any blood, and I'm starting to freak out a little bit here. So I ran up the hill, called Dad, and asked him what he thought I should do. We had snow coming in that night, and decided I would just go to the last place I heard him and see if he was laying there. And even that was a little bit more challenging than I would have hoped. You know, everything looks different when it's pitch black and you're using a headlamp. But after about 5 minutes of looking over there, I walked up on him and I was pretty pumped. So anyway, that's the story of my biggest buck ever. And to shoot him on the ground with a bow at 12 yards, it just makes for a really cool story, and I couldn't be happier. But this buck really, I don't know if I should say thanks or if I should say sorry to Trevor, because turns out the morning before I shot him, he ended up seeing this deer out in the field from the tree stand, and he was way too far. He actually couldn't tell exactly what it was, and he called it a possible shooter, I think, which is hilarious looking back. But it ended up being this deer. You can tell in the footage, and he kind of bedded him up for me, and we knew there was a big one in there. We knew they were coming out, and it just took an aggressive move to be able to get in there close and get in their wheelhouse and get in bow range. So a lot of people wouldn't have taken that risk to go and hunt on the ground like that, and I wanted to set up a tree stand, but there was just no good options, and just did what I had to. And like I said, I got really lucky. Got to thank the Lord above, thank God. Couldn't be more happy with how it all came together. So anyway, that's gonna wrap up the video, and hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you stay tuned for the next one. We're gonna see you all there. Thanks for watching.